Because, and I don't think I've said this yet, but race is not real. It is a social construct. We made it up. Like money! There is no genetic or biological legitimacy to the concept of race whatsoever. There is more genetic diversity within racial groups than between them. A black person could be more genetically similar to a white person than to another black person. There is more genetic diversity with black people than any other racial group because, you know, we all came from Africa. Originally, we're all Africans. We spent a majority of our time on this planet, on this one continent. We should be proud of our African heritage. And even if you insist on making some sort of racial distinction, according to Ancestry.com, the average African American has about 30% European ancestry. You know, because partially the rape of enslaved people. Looking at you, Thomas Jefferson, you founding father of America, you. And then add on top of that the other layer of bullshit to this debate that the very concept of intelligence is completely subjective and breathtakingly complex, and the idea that we could come up with a single test and number to accurately measure it or proclaim to understand its significance or be able to quantify it on a genetic level is absurd. There is no gene for intelligence. And so the endeavor of seeking out and comparing the genetic factors involved in intelligence to groups that are not genetically defined but socially constructed is by very definition an invalid scientific endeavor. It rests on entirely unscientific notions about the nature of race and intelligence. The fact is that the only aim of this project is to reinforce the notion that there is something inherently and innately inferior about black people. As Ezra Klein states, throughout our history,
European descended white men of scientific mind looked around them, looked at the society they saw, looked at the outcomes people had in the society they saw, looked at the science pulled from those outcomes, right? And it was called science back then too. And said, you know what? What we are seeing here is a result of innate differences between the races.
So let's pause for a moment and consider how this web of intellectual darks could be so thoroughly and embarrassingly wrong about race in America. Now, to be clear, these guys don't all universally share the same views on every issue. That's the appeal of the association of the clever guys. Sam Harris would not claim that systemic racism doesn't exist at all. And even Jordan Peterson has acknowledged that it's a factor that contributes to inequality.
One of the factors. One of many, many factors.
So, while Sam Harris, a prominent atheist and self-proclaimed liberal, may seem like an unlikely member of this brainy bleak batch, he is also part of the problem, and has thrown in his lot with these right-wing reactionaries, because it turns out they have a lot in common. For starters, they all share a disdain for the left, and their supposed suppression of a free exchange of ideas. Sam believes that the left has deemed it not okay to talk about anything to do with race and gender. Yet when it comes to the issue of reparations, he thinks we should wait a couple of years before we have that conversation.
I'm totally open-minded on the reparations issue, but talk about another way to lose to Trump, right? I mean, this is, let's wait 2 years before we have this conversation.
And the truth is, they all share the broad strokes of the same explanation for racial inequality. That the cause of racial inequality is in large measure due to the innate characteristics of black people, their genetics and their culture, and that the solution to this problem is for society to become colorblind and for black people to, pick themselves up by their bootstraps, a thing that is possible. These basic ideas are not new, but the most recent configuration of this fundamental error in reasoning, which has equipped a generation of young people with the rationale to justify racial inequality and racist policies with racist ideas, and/or the racist ideas to serve as a justification for racial inequality and racist policies. Take your pick. So, when you consider the level of crime in the black population, if you were Sam Harris, you might conclude that this is evidence of a cultural problem.
At minimum, we have a cultural problem that has to be solved. And um, only the black community can really solve it. I mean, this is something. It's like, and on some level, understanding the origins, even if we knew that the origin of the problem was white racism. We have slavery, we have Jim Crow, and then we have a direct, just line of falling dominoes to the problem of inner city violence, for black teenagers. Let's just say that was true. That still doesn't tell you what the remedy is now. I mean, how do you get people to live different lives now, and to value their lives?
So, according to Sam, even if the origins of violence in the black community lie in our history of racism and racist policies, now it's just up to those violent blacks to change their culture. Might I humbly suggest that perhaps we try things like investing in black communities, funding public education or housing, or public health, or ending the war on drugs before we bolster the claim that an extreme minority of violent offenders in a population of 42 million people in this country is an indicator that this community has the cultural problem of not valuing their lives? The truth is that this grid of grimy geniuses fall very neatly into a long legacy of white people who have explained away racial inequality, justified by all sorts of scientific theories and racist ideas about black genetics and black culture in order to perpetuate racist policies, which maintains the status quo of black inequality while anointing white people with privilege in society. And interestingly, the racist ideas always seem to perfectly adapt to the particular inequality and racist policy of the time. Thomas Jefferson stated that, "Never yet could I find that a black had uttered a thought above the level of plain narration." This racist idea served the function of justifying the brutality of slavery. And when Ben Shapiro says the following, well, just take a listen.
Well, New York City now wants to shut down these highly gifted programs specifically on the basis of the lie that New York City's schools are being divided not by academic performance, but based on race. Well, maybe the alternative is that black and Hispanic kids are not doing as well on the test to get into the gifted programs.
That's right, Ben. It's not that schools are more segregated today than they were in the late 1960s because of racist policies that relegated so many black people into areas of concentrated poverty and denied black people the ability to accumulate wealth, which has resulted in their children being undereducated in a public school system that is largely and inexplicably funded by property taxes. It's because they're not doing well on the tests, because of their culture and their dumb IQs. Judge me by my test score, man, not by the something of my etc. Hey, thanks for watching that clip. Here's the evergreen end plate to ask you to like and subscribe. It's any day of the year where you are.